G'day everyone, welcome back to another show on Roll With The Punches. My name's Tiffany Cook and today I'm speaking to the wonderful Darren Hodge. He's an Ambulance Victoria MICA Flight Paramedic of 34 years now?
35.
35?
Very old.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot of flying around. He's also the author of this brilliant book, A Life on the Line. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tiff. It's great to be
here. What a
here.
pleasure. You were episode 19 of my podcast, and that
right?
was very early days because, as you know, I roll out a lot of episodes per week.
You do. You're a huge star now, a celebrity on the podcast scene.
I am in my world.
Yeah, I'm watching the tracking, seeing you going up and up and up. Well done, you.
It's been amazing, but I remember how excited I was to speak to you, and I remember how much I love, like, as you know, and as a lot of my listeners know, I adore my Ambulance Victoria paramedics and the work that you do and the lives that you live. And I like to share it with the world because most of us,
well, thank you, Tiff.
mere mortals.
You've been very supportive to the ambulance community, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, tell my viewers, not listeners, my viewers, what got you into working as a paramedic?
I had a neighbour who was a paramedic, and from the early stage, that's all I wanted to do. I'm not really sure. I've never had anything else other than wanting to become a paramedic. So it's, I was lucky enough to live the dream, really. So here I am 36 years later, and I still like going to work. So I've been very lucky.
I feel like I'm the opposite end of that scale. Like I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Well, I think it's I look at all the young people in today's world. It's tough for them trying to find their calling. But no, it's funny. My oldest son is doing medicine, and from the early stage, 5 years old, I want to be a doctor. And so maybe it's in our blood or something. But no, I had a wonderful career. I've been very privileged to work for Ambulance Victoria, and I still look forward to going to work.
I love it. Crazy times though lately.
Crazy times, yeah. Really tough times for anyone in health. Lots of pressure, and it's the job's changing and evolving, and not always in a lot of the good ways. So the demands on ambulance has never been higher, or demands on health has never been higher. And I'm really sympathetic to some of the things that our people are seeing, and it causes us distress as a profession when we can't attend to emergencies in a timely fashion because we're under such strain. So it is difficult. Yeah.
Do you think that we are keeping up with?
No.
No.
In fact,
falling behind.
I think they've done a lot in terms of patching and putting their fingers in the dike, but I worry terribly that we're going to have some days where people are going to die because we can't get ambulances to them in a timely way. So that's the risk for people in pre-hospital, and I think people that are working in the hospitals, the strain that they're under in emergency departments has never been seen, and will break a lot of people through this pandemic.
And what I feel and what I see underneath that is people like yourself, the trauma of watching that play out and the feeling of not being able to do the job that you've raised your hand to want to do. I
think that's very, very true. I watch, all the young people talking and stuff like that, and I haven't been at work for a few months because I've had an injury, and I feel an element of guilt about not being there because, people are in the trenches and they're working really hard, and I'm sort of sitting back in the office and not helping. So I understand all those feelings, but it's going to be a challenging time for us, but it's the Australian way. We'll put our shoulder to the wheel and push on. Yeah.
Not many people get to call themselves a MICA Flight Paramedic. No. So they're about 80-something.
I'm not sure what the actual total number is, but we represent about 1% of the workforce. So I think we've got about 50 at the moment, and we've got about 5,000 paramedics. So a small percentage.
Yeah, wow. So you're elite. You've got the elite.
Not elite. No. Just people that have just progressed and trained hard.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about this book.
Yep. So the book, I wrote the book at the start of a pandemic, which is not a great time to release a book. But it was really, there's probably a few reasons for writing it, but it was probably born after the Bali bombing. So in 2005, my wife and I decided to get married. I asked her and she said yes, which was obviously a good thing. Yeah, it is a bonus. I'd been married before, and the thought of getting married again was not necessarily appealing to me because my first marriage wasn't a particularly good one. But so we had a couple of kids, and I thought, the time was right. So we decided to go to Bali to get married. So we arrived there in the year of 2005, and we'd had arrived in country and only been there for a few hours when the second Bali bombing was committed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. So my wife's a nurse, obviously I'm a paramedic, and we'd arrived in country and that disaster took place. So I saw some footage in Bali one where there was a man sitting on a stretcher and he was being attended to by a nurse, an Australian nurse in Bali, and he made the comment that he said he knew he was going to be okay because this nurse came and said that she would stay with him until he was repatriated. Yeah. So I said to Julie, we should go down and see if we could help. I did think, given the experiences of Bali one, that we would have a better response from Australia. But so we rolled down to the hospital in Denpasar and with our credentials in hand, and very, very tense scenes, lots of heavily armed people in the hospital. And there was a bit of a language challenge, and they didn't necessarily understand what we were saying. But the one thing that was made very clear to us is that we could only help Australian patients. So from the moment we arrived, we were taken on this hunt for the Australian patients within the hospital, and we were taken through various wards, we were taken through the emergency department, and given what had happened, the emergency department was under incredible strain. And we walked in to see a very young Indonesian man. He was horrifically injured, and he was getting no care, no treatment whatsoever. And I spoke to the doctor, who spoke perfect English. He'd been educated in Australia in doing his MD, but he said I couldn't help. I said we would help this chap. We could make his death better because he was going to die. It was pretty clear, but we weren't allowed to help anyone other than the Australians. It was harrowing, and it's against what we believe in this country. So from there, we were taken into operating rooms, and we were looking for these Australian patients. We would walk into a minute of an operation, and it was bizarre. And we were eventually taken into this small room, and we walked in, and we found ourselves in the morgue. And it was such, given what had happened, it was just horrific. And we immediately began to protest. We didn't want to be there, and we were very harshly and sternly told to be quiet and stand to the side. And a large throng of Indonesian media and officials came in, and they did a press conference from the morgue. There's no censorship on the media in Indonesia, and they filmed and paraded the bodies and the body parts for the cameras. It really does defy what we would have happen in this country. And I remember sitting there and just being in total disbelief. And in fact, the piece that they were shooting from the morgue, obviously they were speaking Indonesian and we didn't understand, but the following day we got back from this ordeal to our hotel, and we saw this piece on their television, and through the subtitles we could learn what they were saying. And this official stood there, and he stood there in front of the camera, and behind this man who was holding an intact spine, Julie and I were standing pressed up against the wall, and he stood there with this spine, and from the subtitles we learnt that this was the spine of one of the bombers. He'd walked into a restaurant and had a backpack on and self-detonated, and this was all that was left of him. I mean, this is such a macabre scene, Tiff.
Wow.
This could have been like any one of us at our chiro or a physio where he's telling you why you've got a sore back. But this was a real spine, and it was terribly troubling to me, that experience. I still think about it a lot. But from there we were taken to a part of the hospital known as the Australian Hospital. It was built by the Australian government after Bali 1. And if you picture the hospital in Denpasar, which essentially looks like a great big shower block, everything's tiled and people lay on the floors on mats, and you walk into the Australian Hospital, you could be walking into Werribee Hospital or Warragul Hospital. It's lino halfway up the walls, standard hospital beds. All the nurses wear full surgical garb with gowns and masks. The doctors walked around in thongs and t-shirts and shorts, which was bizarre. But we walked into this hospital, and we were immediately met by a group of people that were very hostile towards both Julie and I. They assumed we were media, and there was a large group of media out the front trying to get information. And they were there protecting their friends. And if you were in a crisis and you wanted some people to be around looking after you, this group of family and friends were extraordinary. And once we sort of announced that we were medical people and we were just offering to help in any way we could, one of the group actually grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and he dragged me to the bedside of one of his friends, and a man by the name of Terry Fitzgerald. And he said, "I don't know anything about medical, but this man is my friend and he's dying." And I remember looking at the monitor and looking back at him, and looking at the monitor and looking back at him. And, you know, I couldn't hide the shock on my face. And he was right. His friend was dying. And really sadly, Terry was a man who was on holidays with his family, and he was in a restaurant in Kuta, and that man's that walked in with the spine, he walked into this restaurant and self-detonated in the restaurant, and he killed Terry's son, who was 16 at the time, and critically injured Terry, and severely injured his daughter, who I think Jessica was about 13 at the time. And you know, it was bizarre. You know, he was standing there, and he's got me by the scruff of the neck. He's saying, do something. And, you know, I'm standing there in billabong shorts with a Rip Curl t-shirt on, going, well, I just can't walk into a hospital in a foreign country and take over. But the interesting thing from the hospital's perspective, as soon as Julie and I walked in, we were given complete and autonomous care of both Terry and Jessica. And yeah, it was very bizarre. Whatever we asked for, they just gave us drugs, everything. And you know, it was really a bizarre situation. And we asked the doctors to come over and give us a handover about what happened to Terry, and the doctors weren't that keen to talk to us. But I was trying to understand why Terry was so close to death. His heart rate was very high, his blood pressure was very low, he was not making urine, which is a sign that there's no blood going to his kidneys, which ultimately will kill you, not to mention all the trauma he'd suffered. But one of the things that they were very keen to show us is that they'd all come to us, all the doctors had come to Australia and trained at the Alfred Hospital, and they were trained in burns and trauma surgery. And Terry had large percentage burns, and they were showing us this formula that you use for fluid resuscitation for burns. And I remember them being very proud that they'd learnt this formula from the Alfred Hospital, and they kept talking about the Alfred. And I remember looking at the formula, and the formula was correct, but the fluid, their maths was not. So Terry, in the acute phase, needed 16 litres of fluid, which is enormous. We give people enormous amounts of fluid in acute burns, and they'd given him 1.6 litres. So he'd had a tenth of what he needed.
Oh, my God.
And that's really why he was pretty close to death. And as soon as we sort of worked that out, I said, oh, can I have some fluid? They didn't give us a bag, they gave us a box. And we began resuscitating Terry. Yeah, it was a really, really crazy time. And Julie, my wife, she's an accident emergency nurse with 30 years. She took over looking after Terry's daughter, Jessica, who had these horrific burns. And yeah, it was such a bizarre setting, Tiff.
Do you own your own business but keep falling behind on bookkeeping? Are you drowning in paperwork, invoices and Excel spreadsheets, or leaving it to the last minute and lodging late? Renee Baker and her team of friendly bookkeepers can make sense of your numbers and keep all your compliance in line. Business Services by Ren offer fixed monthly bookkeeping packages to suit your needs and requirements. Our Xero accredited team can help you go paperless with top-of-the-line software support. Contact us today on 0412 222 498 or visit bsbr.com.au. Text me when you get home. We've all said that to a friend and wish we didn't have to. Everyone should be able to live in and enjoy a safe environment. Introducing the new app Safey, developed to give users additional peace of mind. Safey's panic button feature takes continuous pictures, records audio, and activates a GPS locator. In seconds, an alert is sent to your chosen Safey emergency contact. Play it Safey. Download a free version now.
At Michael Benjamin and Associates, we understand that everyone's life is different, and so are your legal needs. We take the time to understand your personal circumstances and requirements to deliver the best results. We predominantly practice in family law, wills, probate and administration, and property law and conveyancing. With over 30 years' experience, our friendly, attentive and highly experienced lawyers are your local firm of choice for all your legal matters. Visit mblaw.com.au or call 9558 0558 today.
I often think about it, and you know, I think about it largely for being a pretty negative experience, but I also think about it in terms of some of the positives, and the family and friends that were caring for both Terry and Jessica, their loyalty and support of them was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And you know, we also saw some really wonderful things, and some, I guess, some terrible things. There was a lady that was in the hospital that was part of the group, and when we were there, we'd been there for a number of hours, and she started taking our photographs, and and asking questions. And I didn't really get the grasp of why she was asking this and taking our photos. And she, oh, Terry will want to remember this story. And I became very good friends with this man who dragged me to the bedside. And we were chatting, and I said, who's this woman? How does she fit into the family and friends? And he says, oh, she's not part of the family and friends. She's a nurse. She's just here helping. As soon as he said it, I went, she's not a nurse. You know, she doesn't have the vernacular. She doesn't have the language. And she was a journalist. Oh. And she took those photographs and sold the story to a very famous women's magazine in Australia. So that side of the bad side of it was terrible, but one of the positives I think about when I think about that experience was that Tony Abbott was there on holidays. Now, I know people will have their opinion about Tony Abbott, but I met him, and in that circumstance, he was nothing but exceptional. Yeah. His compassion to the family and friends was extraordinary. And when we found the list of the Australians that were in fact injured in Bali, Terry and Jessica had been listed as deceased. And I'd gone around, a doctor had flown in from Singapore on behalf of the Australian government, and he had a list of all the patients, and he asked Julie and I to go around and check on these certain people within the hospital. And it was my conclusion that despite us resuscitating Terry in that acute phase, he had severe burns, he had shrapnel injuries, they'd taken his spleen out. His risk of infection and dying was really, really high, and they'd put him into... He was not ventilated, he was not on a ventilator, but he was in like a drug-induced stupor for all his pain. And it was my opinion that if he was to stay there for a long period of time, he would die. And through Tony's advocacy, he went to the top of the list, and in fact, he was the first person extradited from Bali. So, people can have their opinions about Tony Abbott, but my experience with him was he was nothing short of exceptional. And ultimately, I think Terry's survival was because of his advocating for his early departure from Bali. So extraordinary. And Terry survived his ordeal. He ended up being a partial paraplegic. Some of the structural had ruptured his spinal cord. Had terrible injuries and terrible burns. But he wrote a tribute book. He wanted to write a tribute book for his son, Brendan, and he asked all the people that had helped along the way. And he asked myself and Julie to write our story. So I was troubled by Bali. Despite being a paramedic for over 25 years at the time, it very, very distressing, and the scenes from the morgue and the people dying, and there were people that were dying in the ICU all around us. And that sitting down and writing that story out was really powerful for me. It was really proved to be a really positive experience. And it wasn't till a few years later I was working as a MICA Flight Paramedic on one of our helicopters, and I went to a terrible job, and where we performed an in-field amputation of a man's leg, which is very unusual. And I decided to go back and write about that experience, hoping that it would be uplifting like it was with the Bali experience. So I did that, and to my great surprise, it was powerful. So from that moment, I'd learnt a lot about managing my mental health, which when I first started in ambulance, you weren't allowed to talk about mental health. People would laugh at you. It was frowned upon, which is a terrible shame. But, I'd learnt this valuable lesson, and I started journaling, and that's how the book was born. So that's the long answer to the question, wasn't it?
I love that. It's like the amount of people I've spoken to that have survived things that you just go, wow, it's amazing. And it's like the fact that you were there, and that's the reason that he is alive. And there's...
Well, there's lots of reasons why Terry survived, but two nurses... The tragedy of that whole story is that there was many people that helped that family, and two nurses were on holidays there together, and they put Terry and Jessica into the back of the ute and they drove them to hospital. Now, these were two high-functioning, life-loving women that were on holidays together. And it destroyed both their lives, that experience. Like, they had such severe PTSD from that experience that both their lives were destroyed. And there was other people that helped, the family and friends that were sitting there supporting them. That life-changing event wasn't for Terry and Jessica. Obviously, the dramatic impact of losing Brandon and the severe injuries that they both received, but the ripple effect of all those people that were touched by that experience, it was terrible. And the reason why I think Terry is alive is because of that chain of all those people that joined together and helped them through that acute phase. And, it was a terrible thing. But, the interesting thing from that experience from me is there was plenty of times where we were sitting there for many hours waiting for the planes to come to take these people away. And I'd be sitting there looking at Terry and I go, you are me. You just wanted to bring your family to Bali to have a holiday. And, my kids were back at the hotel playing with my parents that we'd taken them with us. And by the grace of God, if you want to go down that path, but, he was just a good dad taking his family out to dinner on their holiday, and their life has now changed.
Nobody wants to go to court. At Testart Family Lawyers, we encourage all forms of alternative dispute resolution. Testart's team of Melbourne family lawyers have extensive experience in all areas of family law. Whatever your legal issue is, our family law service is designed to make the process as painless as possible while striving to achieve the results you want. Experience, excellence and compassion. Testart Family Lawyers, we take care of you. Call us today on 9039 3364.
Is your business facing financial difficulty or the prospect of insolvency? PKF Melbourne can draw on a comprehensive and varied range of solutions to help. Our insolvency experts will give you the right advice at the right time. Don't let financial difficulty take hold of your business. Get proactive with PKF Melbourne. Our team specialises in all types of insolvency and provides a range of additional services. We've been providing insolvency services throughout Australia for over 3 decades. Let us support your business. Contact us now.
Would you like a superpower? With an AED, you have the power to restart a heart in cardiac arrest. Over 33,000 Australians experience cardiac arrest every year. Sadly, only 10% survive. Using an AED within the first 3 minutes increases survival rates by 70%. AED Authority is on a mission to make more places heart safe. Places just like yours. Anyone can use an AED. AED Authority has the advice and support to help you choose the right device. AEDs give ordinary people like you superpowers. No cape needed.
On to a more enlightening topic.
Go.
Tell me your story about, was it Paris?
Paris. I have a strange sense of humour. Most paramedics do. We have a dark sense of humour, and my sense of humour has got me into trouble on more than one occasion. Black humour is born out of the fact that we need to laugh about stuff, and I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily understand, and sometimes their timing's not right. Generally, paramedics make jokes about things because they're trying to deal with the stress. This is not one of those stories. So one of my best friends, we were doing a medical retrieval, so we were going to Paris to get an Australian who was sick or injured. I don't remember the details of the patient, but we go over there on behalf of the insurance companies and then we fly them back. Now, there's some shenanigans that goes on between paramedics, and we were going into the airport in Paris, and as we're walking through immigration, one of the profiles that come through checking on the patients, trying to identify the drug smugglers and etc., came up and asked me what my business in Paris was. And I said, I was here doing a medical retrieval. And he said, this is very interesting. I said, I'll tell you what's interesting. The guy over there in that line with the white shirt, I think he's got drugs in his rectum. He said, this is very interesting. And I says, yeah, it's really interesting. And so he disappears. And I'm sitting in there in this line, moving along, thinking this is going to be one of those moments we're going to talk about for years.
And it is.
And it is, not for how I'd necessarily planned it, but all of a sudden, out of nowhere came 2 gendarmes. So they've got the peaked hat, they've got the Uzi stub machine guns on their things, and they're walking with their big duck walks down the hallway, and I am beside myself. This is going to be hilarious. Anyway, they started walking towards me, and I went, they did. They walked straight up to me and they said, sir, will you step out of the line? I go, no, not me, the guy with the white shirt. And they go, sir, step out of the line. I go, no, not me. And I didn't move. And one of them just literally put his hand on my shoulder and pressed in some sort of funny way. One of my legs became paralysed. I became incontinent of urine. I'm standing there like this. He said, walk this way. And they marched me down this long, dark corridor into this room, big empty room. There's a table on it. And they said, strip. And I got cavity searched. I got strip searched. They put gloves on. They lifted things. They tucked, lifted, moved. It was a really bad experience, Tiff. And I walked out.
Laughing.
Oh my goodness. I walked out like I'd been detained for over an hour, and I walked out through customs to the baggage area, and my friend is there. He goes, where have you been, mate? I said, let's not talk about it, we just need to go home and have a shower. I'd been violated. And I'm certain that those gendarmes and that profile, I thought, well, the Australian, you think you're a funny man? Well, we'll show you what funny is, French style. So
Oh, mate.
don't ever be funny. Don't be funny in immigration and customs. Not in today's world.
I feel like you would. How long ago was that?
It's probably 8 years ago.
I feel like you wouldn't dare even think of saying something like that these days.
Well, you probably shouldn't have been then, but no, you must understand the friendship, and that sort of stuff is not outside the realms of being silly. So, some interesting experiences doing international retrievals.
That is very hilarious.
Yeah.
What I was going to say before was when working with you guys, and I remember, we watch paramedics on the TV show Paramedics, and it's amazing, and it's so interesting, but it wasn't until I worked with you guys and I knew you that it became real, and there was a real sense of empathy and actually awareness. And, I watched that show after I was doing boot camps with you guys at one point, and one of the paramedics had come off a very big and very traumatic job, and Rain had said to me, this person's coming down, he's just left this job, he's just been doing this. And so I had an idea of what he's just been exposed to, and I just remember being like, oh my goodness. And, oh wow. Like, oh, who would ever have to do that? And, we watch it on television, and even though we know it's real, we're on the job with them, there's still this sense, because I just feel like there's this sense of, it's the movies. We don't empathise the same. Once you know someone...
Yeah, I have to admit I don't watch the paramedic shows. I find them difficult to watch, but there's certainly parts of doing the job that are really, really difficult and challenging, and I'm not sure those shows capture them, because they're the 1%ers, or the 2%ers, and you can't have cameras with people all the time, but some of the things that we ask people, a child gets run over by a caravan, someone has to go and deal with it, and paramedics train for that. We all want to go and help, but the interesting thing of the price that's paid by wanting to help, it can be costly to you. And I've watched so many people suffer PTSD in this job. I think all the people I work with at the Air Wing would have an element of it. You can't keep putting people and exposing them to those horrific things, and I still journal. So the book is written, obviously there will be no book 2, but I still journal, and it was only a week or two after the release of the book I went to probably one of the top 3 worst jobs ever, and I spent a lot of time writing about that in detail because it was just so distressing. But we one of the things that I love about particularly where I work is that we care for each other. And so what typically happens at my base is that if someone does a bad job, the text message will go out and say, guys, heads up, this crew, and all the pilot, the paramedic and the crewman will be mentioned, went to a 2-year-old that was run over by a car, and we will get round that person. And the ability to debrief with a peer, someone that by, again, the grace of God, that could have been them at that scene, knowing about the unique pressures that come with our role, I find that incredibly powerful. And I think it's very good about supporting each other.
Yeah. Well, you guys are amazing. You're my favourite humans on the planet.
Thank you for
the work you do. Thank you for this. Everybody, go get a copy. A Life on the Line website?
Yeah, just Google it, Life on the Line. It'll come up in all the bookstores.
There you go. Boom. Darren Hodge, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Tiff.